So some of you might recognize me from TikTok as the Clue Man, a very left-leaning veteran who helps politically challenged Americans get a clue. And some of you also may recognize me from this stage telling a story from back when I worked at the Wilderness Treatment Center in Marion, Montana. And that is a treatment center that works with boys and young men ages 14 to 24. And the story I told, I was a chief wilderness instructor, and the story I told is that I found a compass in a hole out in the middle of the Bob Marshall Wilderness at a time in my life when I needed a new direction. So the universe kind of gave me a little kick, you know. And so this story takes place about 6 months before that story. I was working at the Wilderness Treatment Center. I was out in the Bob Marshall Wilderness with a group of boys, and I was trying to get a little serenity of my own. They learned the serenity prayer, but I was a wilderness instructor, not a substance abuse counselor. So my version of serenity was to try to get my nose as far away from those boys as possible, because about the end of week 1, they were starting to take on an odor. They were detoxing, and they were boys and young men, so you can understand that they were getting a little dank. And I was about 200 yards in front of them, upwind, and I went through this beautiful meadow next to a creek, and went up this hill, and when I crested the top of the hill, the trail leveled out, and on the side of the hill was a huge huckleberry patch. And when you get one resupply in a 21-day trip, any chance you get to forage and fill your stomach with fresh fruit, you do it. So I set down my pack, I grabbed my little backpacking cup because it has a lid, and I thought, well, I'm going to eat my fill, and then I'm going to fill my cup, and I'll have some for later. So I start moving down the trail kind of along the huckleberry patch, and I keep seeing these bushes further in there just hanging heavy with berries. So I moved into the patch, and at one point I noticed there's Oregon grouseberries down low, and those are even sweeter. You know, they're not sour like a huckleberry, they're like a blueberry. So I get down on my knee, and I'm picking these Oregon grouseberries and filling my cup, and I hear a noise on the other side of the patch, and I just assumed it was the boys coming up the trail. But after about a minute and a half, I didn't hear any voices, and I didn't hear clanking of gear, so I stood up, and I said, I remember audibly saying, "What the hell?" And the bear that was on the other side of the patch that made that noise, he heard me say, "What the hell?" and he stood up too. So I'm 6'2", and I'm looking eye to eye with this bear, so he was about 6'2". I know I was looking eye to eye because I watched his eyes get as big as mine. And he made two very distinct noises. The first one was, and the second one was, and he dropped and he came charging. So I'm going to step away from my story for a moment to tell you that as a wilderness instructor, you get a lot of training. I was trained as a wilderness first responder. Water procurement and purification, shelter construction, how to build a fire. And one of the things that they really stressed in the training was large animal encounters, specifically apex predators. And one of the things they said about black bear encounters is that 80% of the time, it's a false charge. And I didn't have a lot of time to think about it in the moment, but I had a lot of time afterwards to think about it. And I thought, how do they come up with the 80-20 thing? Like, I know a little bit about statistics, and I know control groups and test groups, and, you know, I'm thinking, are they using mannequins? What? How do they know that 80% of the time this bear's not going to kill you? And then the other thing they taught me was, well, if you stand your ground and look big, it's more likely to be a false charge. So I was like, okay, I could take some comfort in that. So here he comes, back to my story. Here he comes, I'm holding a cup of his favorite food. My fingers are stained purple and smell like huckleberries. And I stood my ground. Not because that's what they trained me to do, for two other reasons. The first one was I didn't have time to do anything else. He was moving so fast. He covered 15 yards, because he's about 15 yards from me. He covered that in a fraction of a second. And the other reason was because I was clenching my butt cheeks together so tight in an effort to keep from shitting myself that if I would have tried to move, it would have been very penguin-esque to try to get away from him. But so I just stood there, and it worked. I was in the control group. 80%, baby! He veered off so close I could have touched him. And at that point, my brain, probably because of the adrenaline, started making some really strange calculations. I've seen those YouTube videos of the people in Yellowstone who get out of their car to go get a picture next to a bison or something. And I always thought to myself, I am so much smarter than those people. But I ran back to my pack, and instead of grabbing my bear mace, I reached down and grabbed my disposable camera. And I headed back for the bear. Now, when I got back, he wasn't charged anymore, he was just grazing. And I don't know if anybody's been fortunate enough to see a black bear graze, but they don't see the berries, they smell them, and they grab an entire bush and pull it over, and they rake it through their mouth. And they've got a lot of dexterity in their lips and their tongue, and they just clean it right off. And they take twigs and leaves and everything. And I knew that because I'd seen piles of blue bear shit that had twigs and leaves in them. So it was all making sense to me. I'm watching this bear. I'm thinking, wow, this is awesome. I'm getting to watch a bear graze, and I must have stepped on a twig or scuffed my foot. And the bear heard me and turned and came halfway up and looked at me, and our eyes met again. And at this time, I just felt this sense of calm. I wasn't scared anymore. He looked at me like, oh, it's just you. And I looked at him like, it's just you. I wasn't afraid of him, and he wasn't afraid of me. I knew he could have kicked my ass 5 minutes ago, and he didn't. So I was just in the moment. And, most of the time spent in the backcountry working with troubled youth, you just feel like a pack mule carrying heavy weight up and down mountains and babysitting other people's problem children. But in this case, I had a moment where I was like, yeah, this is what it's all about. So I watched him a little while and then headed back to my pack, thought, okay, he's gone. I'm just going to go back to my pack and see where the boys are at, because they were 200 yards behind me. And I get back to my pack and realize I've got my camera in my hand. I was so caught up in the moment, I never even took a picture. But as I'm putting the camera in the pack, the boys are coming up the trail. And the first thing the first boy says is, hey, did you see that bear? So unbeknownst to me, they had stopped in the meadow to have a day-by-day meeting, and they had kicked up this bear, and none of them thought to blow their whistle or say, hey, Bean, there's a bear coming. So that was kind of silly, but I told them about the whole incident, and I'd like to say that that's the end of the story, but it isn't. Because about 8 months later, I left the Wilderness Treatment Center. I got a job over at Northwest Academy and Ascent in Naples, Idaho. And the Ascent program, if you're not familiar with it, is based on the Native American Vision Quest idea, where the kids go out in the backcountry and find themselves, have a vision quest. So they built the camp with teepees for the kids to stay in and a big medicine wheel. And one of the traditions that they would do prior to going out on a wilderness course is they would pull a medicine animal card from a deck. And now it's random because the deck's been shuffled. The medicine animal is choosing you. So you might get the coyote, the trickster, or the owl, the wise owl. You guys already know what card I pulled. The bear. Thank you.